Welcome to Lead Live, reminding you of your personal genius and how you think in order to actualize what you desire.
Greetings from all of us here at Lead Live. LEAD stands, for those of you who may not know, Leadership Excellence and Achievement on Demand. We're so pleased that you're able to join us for this live broadcast. And for those of you who are able to look at it after we broadcast, we welcome you to share questions, to definitely tune in to subsequent shows or broadcast. Leverage leadlivenow.com. Let me talk about today in terms of wealth and wealth creation. There's so many opportunities for all of us, and critical to getting to the place that we want to get or that we envision is to be clear about that vision, whatever that vision may be. And today we're going to talk specifically about how to leverage real estate acquisitions to build wealth. So the title thus is Building Wealth Through Real Estate Acquisitions. We have someone that I've had the opportunity to observe over the years who's quite remarkable, humble spirit, and yet brilliant in her own way, who's going to share with us some of her own experiences with clients and with colleagues as well as friends who have actually built wealth through real estate acquisitions. So we'll talk about the fundamentals and we'll talk about some of the abstract. And you may have additional questions to pose to which we will respond. So I'd like to introduce Lynell. Lynell is a branch manager at one of the top mortgage corporations in the country, Mason McDuffie. She's a Bay Area native. For those of you who, when you hear Bay Area, wherever you're at across the planet, Bay Area means Northern California Bay Area. She grew up in San Francisco during the heydays of her beloved 49ers franchise and is now based in Oakland, California. She has been helping individuals tackle their financial goals via specialized financial or financing solutions to purchase, refinance, or renovate homes for over 3 decades. Originally, she was licensed as a real estate agent in her late teens. Isn't that pretty interesting? Remarkable? A lot of us think we have to wait until we finish college. She was in her late teens. She then went on to find that residential financing to be actually her sweet spot. So as we bring her on, I'd like to, share a little bit about the assets that we're talking about. Building wealth in and of itself, when we're clear about that, that's an asset. Real estate holdings themselves can be assets, and the whole process of acquisition. What's building wealth? The process of generating long-term income through multiple sources. We can talk about that. Real estate is one key means. Many people think in terms of savings. They think in terms of investment. Real estate is really income generating asset if organized, structured appropriately. Then what is real estate itself? It's land, it's the holdings on the land, it's all the resources on that land that you purchase or may have had given to you. And that includes water, trees, minerals, structures. And then what's acquisition? It's any asset that you buy or that, again, is assigned to you, given to you. So please, Jet, bring on Lynell. We want to have this remarkable professional with us. Hello, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Elnora, and very happy and excited to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Oh, it's my honor. And we didn't talk about this before, or even just before the broadcast began. But when I think of you, and I think of so many other women, Black women, women of color, women who don't come from wealth. I think of Michelle Obama. I think of, oh my goodness, our vice president. And our vice president's from where? Here in Oakland, California.
Oakland. That's right. Yeah.
And we know that woman, right? You know, personally.
We know Kamala.
Yeah, we know, and we can pronounce her name.
We
So
know
when
her.
yes, and it brings such a smile to my heart. It may not even be manifested on my face, but it's in my heart about the capacity of each one of us. And neither one of those individuals were born into wealth. They created wealth.
Right.
And for those who may not be familiar with this broadcast, we define wealth in 5 ways, and they all are interrelated. You can't have one without the other. And it manifests differently for different people. And that is faith, however you define faith for yourself, family, fitness, finance, and fun. And
Mm,
so we're talking about a specific area of wealth that
mhm.
enables all the other areas to really thrive.
Sure.
So I tell us something about you, Lynell, that otherwise no one would know because it's not on social media. Your friends don't, you know, they can't take it for granted, but something unique about you.
Unique about me. Well, I always think it's unique, although this may be somewhere deep in social media, that I have a twin brother. And uh, I'm 5'2" and he's probably 5'10". I'm not sure what happened, how it was that he got the height, but I got.
I love it. I love it.
So yeah, so we're a family of there's 5 of us, and he and I, as the twins, we are the oldest of the 5.
Oh, wow.
And I it's so funny. I have to tell people all the time, yes, I'm a twin, but no, we're not identical because he's a boy and I'm a girl. But invariably, people ask me, "Oh, are you identical?" No.
That is hilarious. Even though that they know he's a boy, he's
Of course.
your brother. That's
It's
so
just,
funny.
yeah.
Yeah, it's part of our thinking. We automatically go to certain places
That's
without
right.
much thinking. Yeah.
That's right.
But I think that's hilarious.
Yeah.
So yeah, when we were talking about this area, there's 2 questions that really came up. And the first one is, why is real estate a wealth building tool? What's your answer to that?
The why, well, the reason that it's a wealth building tool is because real estate allows you through various channels, it allows you to uh, establish kind of like a long-term goal and perhaps even retirement. So, when I think about having gotten into this business in the late 80s in my teens, I met people at that time who were buying real estate, residential real estate specifically, and 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, they had amassed several pieces of property, and some of these properties, most of what were income producing. And so, you figure if you buy a piece of real estate that is going to generate income for you now and in, the future, that is a wealth building mechanism. And so that's the reason why I guess, we view it as a wealth, a way or a means to build wealth. And, there's also the how, of course, how you use real estate to build wealth. And everyone has their own process. Sometimes it's by happenstance. Everyone does not buy real estate with the intention to be an investor. Some people are buying real estate to live in, and that's it. But, inadvertently they become an investor. You know what I mean? So that would be.
Yeah, let's drill down just a little bit further. So when you say it, they amassed what I would call assets
Yep.
beyond just having a space to live for themselves, for their families, for even friends.
Sure.
What do you mean by that? Are you saying that the market was such that their house appreciated? Are you saying that they rented their house out where they got more from the rental than the cost of the loan? Are you saying they were able to pay it off early so that literally the house was an asset as opposed to a liability?
Right. It's all of that because I'll use my grandmother as an example because she was probably the first investor that I knew without knowing she was an investor. My grandmother bought real estate when she first moved here. She's from Oklahoma, and she came here with literally nothing, kind of bootstrap type situation. And she bought a little house in Daly City. Um, I'm gonna say in the let's see, I was born in the 60s, so she probably bought the house in the 50s, and she had that house for, I'm gonna say, at least 30 years. And
Mm,
over the course of that time, I mean, initially it was a liability because there was debt against it, but every day, every month, every year, every decade, it would appreciate. Real estate goes up and down like anything in the market, but typically real estate comes back, right? So even if you owe a mortgage against that piece of real estate and it is considered a liability, it can still be an asset simultaneously. Everyone wants to own real estate without, like free and clear. But for some people, it makes sense to have a liability because you then get perhaps a tax deduction, which continues to, make it appear that it's an asset, regardless of whether or not you owe,
mm.
something against it. But yeah, my grandmother was the first investor that I knew, and she still today at 87 owns rental real estate as well as her primary
That is
property.
awesome.
Mhm.
And how did she move from owning her own home to owning rental real
So,
estate?
so the home that she bought in, I'm going to say the 50s,
Mhm.
that was kind of like her stepping stone, if you will. She bought that property. She worked at the post office forever, 40 years or some odd years. And she used to say, if you make a dime, if you make a nickel, save a dime. If you make a nickel, save a dime. I'm like, really, grandmother? She's been telling me that
It's
since
like,
I
what math are you doing?
and she's very serious about it. And so
Yes.
it is what allowed her to,
Mm,
she was always saving. That's the point. She
mhm,
was always saving.
mhm,
Um, the home that she bought was a modest home. It was not her dream home. And that's kind of a lesson in that when you're buying a home, it doesn't have to be your dream home.
mm,
If your intention is just to get into the market, whether it be to become a real estate tycoon or not, right? You have to start somewhere. And so for her, she started somewhere in Daly City, and that house appreciated quite a bit. It allowed her to buy several homes, one of which was a primary residence in Pacifica. So my grandmother lived in
mm,
Pacifica for probably 35 years,
mm,
back in the day. She's now retired, living in Brentwood, California. But yeah, she just used that piece of real estate as a stepping stone, and no one would have ever thought that she would be this, you know, savvy investor because she's from some little
mhm.
farmland in Oklahoma. She didn't have an Ivy League degree or anything like that, but she was smart enough to know that if you make a nickel, you should save a dime.
That makes me remember, and for the life of me, can't think of her name, and I could see her face. Her coloration is about our color, potentially a little bit slightly darker. She died in her early 90s. She was in the Deep South. Most folks thought she was Poe, not
Hmm.
poor, but Poe.
Oh.
She worked her entire life. She worked for other people,
Hmm.
primarily white folks, taking care of kids, taking care of laundry, taking care of whatever.
Yeah,
She made investments that she didn't talk about. She
right.
was like many individuals, just taking care of business. She made
Mhm.
investments in Apple and other kinds of companies long before they were considered to be viable. And when
Uh-huh.
she died with $1 million of wealth. And
Wow.
she donated that wealth. It's a Black woman, very smart, intelligent, brilliant, and not Poe.
Oh,
She donated those assets to institutions that she thought would benefit more people. She didn't have a family of her own. No, no.
yeah.
And
I
so
can't remember her either, Elnora, but I know who you're
yes,
talking about.
I can see her face. I just can't, and I need to honor her by being able to claim her name. And so the power, and you're here, we're here, is just to remind people you don't have to have a legacy of wealth in
No,
order to build a legacy of wealth.
correct.
You don't have to know it all in order to move forward. And yet there's so much resources out there to get people on the right page in order to take the right steps to make that at level of impact. and only in their lives, but hopefully, like these examples, your grandmother, this other woman, we can't recall her name, and there's countless examples
Sure.
across these United States and beyond. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you were saying how, and we're going to get into the how in a moment. The next question is, what is an example? And so you can talk a little bit about the how here. Building wealth through real estate acquisition. So can you think of, in addition to your grandmother, another example of someone who came to you and said, listen, I need a loan. And you're listening, you're going through the process with him or her, and or maybe it's a team, and you get a sense of their goals, and you determine what instruments may be best for them, not in terms only in terms of interest rates, but a time for that a loan to mature. I mean, whatever it happens to be. What was that process like? What's the example?
Well, so I have a lot of examples, but I have a very recent example. A young lady in her 30s purchased her first home in literally right in the middle of COVID in March 2020. So we closed escrow like I think the week before the shelter in place mandate. And this was her first home, and she bought a property out in Richmond, just a little small place. It was not her dream home at all, but she wanted to get into a piece of property. She had done some research and had learned that the amount of rent that she would have to pay was more than what it would be for this little house that she had her eye on. And the house happened to actually be a foreclosure, which was kind of interesting because we don't see a whole lot of foreclosures. We haven't seen a whole lot of foreclosures lately, but there are definitely some foreclosure opportunities out there. And she went ahead and purchased this property. She actually got a gift from a friend for most of the down payment. And because we didn't have a whole lot of time, I could not employ on her behalf any of the first-time homebuyer programs that are available. We didn't have that kind of time. But she got into that property within a 30-day time frame. And she called me 2 months ago and said, hey, I'm thinking of buying something else. She said, and I know I just bought this other house and it hasn't been a year. And I know I got laid off like during the COVID, but I have a new job. Does that matter? I said, no, it doesn't matter at all. So what we did is we looked up what the value of the home she bought in March of 2020. It's $70,000 more now than it was when she bought it. And so that is a great example of amassing wealth through real estate and still owing a mortgage against it. It's still a liability, but now it's worth $70,000 more than it was when she purchased it. So if she were to sell the property, which she's not intending to do, but if she were to sell it, she would, receive $70,000 more than she did when she bought it. So it's just, I love her story because she's a young, she's one of my friend's daughters, and just doing her thing and just being an adult, you know what I mean? And she's having a lot of success, but yeah, she's got her eye on another piece of property in the South Bay, and I'm really excited for her.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Do you have an example of someone who has systematically over time built that wealth?
Yeah, I've had clients who have, let's say, 15 pieces of property, and they didn't start with 15. They started with 1. And they would then take, let's say, your owner-occupied property. So here's the thing. Interest rates are better for borrowers who actually live in the property, right? So if you are refinancing a house that you own and live in, you're going to get a better rate than you would if you were refinancing one of your investment properties, right? And so a lot of times what people do is they'll call me and say, we're really thinking about, buying a rental property. We don't really have any money, but we have this house. Can we pull money out of the house we live in to purchase something else as an investment? I say absolutely. And some of the vehicles used to do that would be either a standard refinance where you get a new first mortgage to replace the one you have, and you add, some money to it. So if you owe $300,000, you need another $100,000. So now we're going to do a $400,000 first mortgage, and that's considered a cash out refinance. Some borrowers would prefer to use a line of credit. So instead of interrupting their existing first mortgage on the home that they currently live in, they're going to get a line of credit, which is a glorified credit card, if you will, but it's secured against your real estate. And they will use that, write checks against it for their down payment, you know, repairs for the rental and those types of things. There's no right or wrong way. It really depends on your individual circumstances, but those are two ways to help build, to buy, to position yourself to buy. And I've had clients over the years utilize that. And, you know, I had one client probably, this is, I'm sure 20 years ago. She was a lawyer. She knew that she did not want to be a lawyer for the rest of her life. And she literally bought a triplex in Oakland using a FHA loan, which only requires a 3.5% down payment. She lived in one of the units, rented the other two out. She used the increase in equity, like in a year and a half, pulled money out of there, bought another one. And then she kept doing it like every couple of years. And she literally retired from, you know, her law gig when she was in her, I'm going to say, late 30s, early 40s. Because that's not what she wanted to do. She wanted to be, you know, a landlord. She wanted to kind of have the flexibility to kind of do her thing. And she was very, very successful. So that's a really good example of someone who, she was strategic about her plan to be a real estate investor.
Yes. Very smart. Very smart. I want to honor those who are viewing. We don't know all that are viewing because some are viewing through different means, whether it's Facebook or it's YouTube or it's on their via their television or because of Roku or Amazon. But want to honor you viewing. If you have questions and you're online using Facebook or YouTube, just place in your questions. And I thank you, Raleigh, for watching, and Parthenia, my dear loved one, for listening, and other critical connections that we know and don't know. Sherilyn writes, Asians like buying real estate. You have a roof over your head, or worse, you grow your own vegetables and raise chickens. I love that. And I'm not going to out Sherilyn. I happen to know Sherilyn, value her, used to work with her, and still love her. And Sherilyn did some things over time that were just strategic. She wasn't thinking, almost like your grandmother, wasn't thinking about the long term, although she cared about the long term. She wasn't trying to build a particular base, but in her investments, she's created wealth that really leaves her with a level of comfort she doesn't have to worry about. And the same thing for her son. So I just want to remind people, when you hear these details from Lynell and you hear our discussion, just recognize this is not the kind of complicated, convoluted set of thinking and transactions that may take you for years to get through. You can just, the first step is what? Decide. The example of the young lady that Lynell just indicated, decided. Attorney, probably excellent. Says, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. I invested in education. I want to do this for a spell. And what I want to do ultimately is become a landlord. So parlayed her leadership experience as an attorney, purchase a home, then purchase a property, purchase another investment property, and there you go. And now she's able to retire and reap the benefits of that investment. So trajectories differ. And the key thing is we want you to understand you get to create your own trajectory. Decide, invest, leverage people like Lynell. You don't have to know it all. She can connect you, as she's connected me, to keep people who have the expertise. She has a great deal. Others have others, and you can build out.
Absolutely.
And so Tomoko writes, what made you purchase real estate? What was the first moment you realized this was your calling?
What made me pursue
real estate?
You know, it's interesting. My grandfather was a real estate agent for 35 years. And so I think it was always in my subconscious. It's not something I woke up and said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. But I ended up in real estate because a family friend needed someone to do some administrative work in his real estate office.
Hmm.
And, my dad, and my stepmom, they were like, oh yeah, Lynell's available. Now I had a full-time job. I had just graduated from high school. I was trying to, I was at De Anza College and I was commuting with a friend. I didn't drive. I didn't get a driver's license until I was 19. So just throwing that out there. So I had to be carried around. And I'll never forget, I got left at De Anza College in the rain. And I had to catch a bus, which was not my thing because I got carried around all over the place. And I had to catch a bus from De Anza, which is in Cupertino, California, all the way back to Palo Alto because my job was at Macy's at Stanford. And I just thought, oh, I got to get a driver's license. And so I immediately got a driver's license. I did not want to be relying on other people. But the point is that when the friend asked if I was interested in doing some administrative work for his office, I went ahead and did it. And he would pick me up every day after my full-time job, take me to his office. I do like a couple of hours worth of administrative work. And after like maybe 4 or 5 months, he asked me, he said, hey, can I pay you double what you're being paid at your full-time job to come and work for me full-time? And I just thought, what? And so because he was a real estate broker and a real estate agent, that's inadvertently, that's how I ended up in the business. And I went to work with him. He sent me to real estate school. Maybe I was 18 when he hired me, but 19, I got my real estate license at 19, all sponsored by my mentor, Lonnie Bogan. And, I just never thought about it being something that I would do this long. I just never thought about it. But, at that age, doing stuff like this, working in mortgage, talking to people about their finances, helping people create, a package that's going to then be reviewed and approved by an underwriter, right? They're the gatekeeper to your finances. And it was such an important role. I felt so, worthy, if you will, because I was helping, these people, accomplish their financial goals. And I didn't have any financial goals of my own at 19. What did I know? Nothing. But I learned a lot through the process. And, I continue to enjoy what I do as a mortgage consultant. I have trained any number of peers kind of how to put a deal together, because early on, the broker Lonnie Bogan, who I spoke about, we tracked foreclosures. So the idea was to assess whether or not the deal was a good deal, and he taught me how to do that. And that was so long time ago, Elnora. But that's how I got into the business. It was by happenstance.
Well, that's interesting because the operative words that I kept hearing you say was helping.
Yeah.
So there was a level of satisfaction you get from helping.
Yeah.
And specifically helping people achieve or meet their financial goals.
Right.
And that's powerful. And so as I think about a number of people, including a brother of mine I've had on here, Paul, we talked about the power of being clear about why we do what we do. And and clearly you're clear, you want to help and you want to ensure that people reach financial goals. And that when you're able to be clear and be able to function in a way that's synergistic with that passion you have, all of a sudden the vistas open up. And so you had intelligence, you gained greater levels of or deeper and broader levels of knowledge and certainly skills and expertise. And then you were able to share that with other people. That's remarkable. So that in and of itself is a major asset that you have. And so I want to thank you for choosing that course, because you've helped people, many people, and probably countless people now, given all over 30 years of really investing and supporting individuals and groups of individuals.
Yeah, and I don't. It's interesting. I don't think about it as this. It's just one of these. This is what I do, kind of a thing.
I know.
And it's all I've ever done. You know what I mean? I've never done anything else except for, mortgage related business. So it's what I know.
But and like you said, you found your sweet spot.
It's my sweet spot. It really, really is, because it's analytical.
Mm,
It's, you have to create strategy. It's what I tell people when they call me. My job is to help you figure out what you can qualify for. And if there's a strategy that needs to be employed in order for you to do that, because sometimes you can't buy today. Sometimes it's down the road. And that's whether you're going to be buying an investment property or a primary residence. It doesn't matter why you're buying it. The point is that you still have to be able to qualify, right? And
yeah.
so, yeah.
Well, Parthenia has this question. When is it too late? I am 65.
If the question is, when is it too late to buy, or is it too late to get into? Okay,
Yeah.
I would say that it's never too late. Yeah, I would say it's never too late. I know that my dad, he's owned real estate for sure, but he when he retired, right before he retired, he decided, okay, I'm gonna buy a retirement home. And I remember having the conversation with him like years prior, saying, hey, Daddy, make sure you purchase your retirement home before you retire.
Mm,
Because, yeah, a lot of times when you retire, the income is different, right, than the employment income. Now, that doesn't apply to everyone. Like firefighters sometimes retire on 90% of their income, but other folks, like my grandmother worked at the post office, she didn't retire on 90% of her income, right? So she had to have other things in place. So for my dad, he made sure to purchase the home he lives in now. He
mm,
purchased it right before he retired.
mm.
Um, and so I would say that it's never too late. It's never too late to buy. And everyone doesn't want to buy. I mean, buying is not the only thing that you can do, as Elnora, you talked about at the top of this discussion. It's just one of the vehicles that you can employ to build wealth. It's just one, but it's a good one.
Yes. And I think one of the things that you implied is the importance of speaking to someone like a Lynell.
For sure.
And we'll have Lynell's details available. In fact, Jet, when you get a chance, just go ahead and put it on the screen. Contact her. Contact someone that you trust. And Lynell is very trustworthy, and otherwise she wouldn't be on as part of this broadcast. Contact someone with expertise and let them know what you're interested in doing and what assets you currently have, financial, direct or indirect. And then she, in this case, Lynell, can walk you through the process of preparing for that home ownership or for that additional purchase. So what you want is intelligence. You don't want to spin around thinking, I wonder because of this, then this. Eliminate the ambiguity, go to experts, and you don't need to get just one set of details from one professional. If you have any questions about that professional, leverage another so
Sure.
that you have enough intelligence in order to be able to say, this is what I'm going to do, and this is the reason why, and this is how I'm going to do it, and this is when.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very, very important to kind of collect all your data, right? So that you have as close to 100% of the facts as possible so that you can make an informed decision. That's one of the other primary things that I share with people, is that my job is not to make decisions for you. My job is to help you understand what your options are so that you can make those decisions for yourself. I mean, yes, I have an opinion, as we all do, but it's really not about my opinion. It's really about the facts, the information, that is available to a consumer.
And I can say that Lynell will work with you as an individual, or your group as a special group, or your organization as a unique organization.
Yeah.
One size does not fit all. And so she's very particular about understanding where you're at, what you need, and then systematically drilling down and informing you accordingly. Now, there's other questions. Jet, would you please put up one of the others from our participants who provided in advance? How do I build wealth using real estate? I think we talked about that, but if there's anything else you want to add to that, Lynell?
Well, I think that it's important, how do you build wealth? You definitely want to make sure that you are eligible to buy real estate, right? So if that's your choice to build wealth via real estate, you want to make sure that your credit is, in the shape that it needs to be in order to do that. You want to make sure that you have the necessary, investment, the down payment available for that. You want to make sure that your income situation, whether it be a self-employed or employed, that is pretty stable, because the process is involved. And so you need to be able to verify that you have all these kind of things in line, and then you can kind of get on your way to building wealth using real estate. And so I guess what my example is that you should get pre-approved or pre-qualified so that you know what you can buy along your journey to build wealth using real estate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's another question. How do you know if the piece of real estate is a good investment? Important question.
Well, you got to do a lot of research, right? So depending on what you are purchasing the property for, if you're purchasing the property to be an investment tool, meaning you're going to rent it out, before you purchase the home, you're going to do all types of research to find out, what other properties in the area that are similar to the one that you're looking at. You're gonna look at what the values of those homes are. So those are what we refer to as comparables in the market. So I'm interested in, this house on Juniper Street, and there's like 3 or 4 homes, in, like a mile or 2 miles away that have sold recently. Are those kind of like in line with what I'm paying? And then also you would want to be looking at, the market rents. They have any number of apps online that you can kind of look up what rents are going for in a particular area. And, this one investor, they said that it was something I was researching. They said that, you have to decide up front if the deal is good, not when you sell. So you need to do your research up front. And it's very similar to what I used to do in the 80s with Lonnie Bogan when we would track foreclosures. So we would get a list of foreclosures, and I would go about kind of doing an assessment of what the property was worth today, what they owed, because this meant, they were in foreclosure. The house was going to, be sold on the courthouse steps. And we needed to figure out whether or not it made sense for us to pay, $200,000 for this house that was worth whatever, 300 for whatever the case may be. This is years ago. But the point is you do your homework up front to understand whether or not it makes sense. And then, you do your projections to figure out how stable is this market? How stable is the rental market? So I can use Oakland as an example. Oakland is a very good rental market. It just is. The one reason it's very good is because housing is so expensive. So, unlike Idaho, where you might have a higher home buying percentage of folks, here in the Bay Area, it's different because it's very expensive. And so you're going to have a lot of renters because of that. That's great for an investor. I mean, like I said, everyone doesn't have to buy, right? And if you are an investor and you own, 10 or 15 rental properties, and you have that's great. We like tenants. Tenants are fantastic. They keep the economy going.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next question, Jet. My group of brothers and I are pooling our funds to purchase multi-dwelling properties. What should we do to make certain that those purchases are smart ones? So you've already answered that in part.
Pretty much. And you can never, there's no 100%. You know what I mean? Make certain, but what you can do is, do your due diligence up front to make sure that the numbers pencil out. And then also make sure that especially if you're pooling your resources with a group of family members or otherwise, you might want to employ, a real estate attorney to make sure that you've got, your I's dotted and your T's crossed, because I've seen any number of situations where family members have purchased together and it turns into a whole just unreasonable situation because people can't make, they can't make a decision, right? or agree on anything. And so, yeah, I think employing an attorney is a great thing. And also, you know, the real estate and the REITs, REIT, real estate. I actually looked it up here. I just because this is something that a lot of people use when they are thinking about. It's a real estate investment trust or REIT, and it basically is. It's the company that owns, operates, or finances the income-generating real estate. And so, oftentimes, when you have, you know, teams of people buying together, they might employ a REIT. And again, you'd have to, you know, have an attorney kind of help you with that.
Smart. That's something I'd never heard of before. Restate the acronym.
It's REIT.
Okay, very good. Interesting. Thank you. Next question. I have little money, but I want to buy a home and investment properties for my family. Well, you've already answered part of the question. How can I do this?
So if this person does not already own a home, my recommendation would be to buy your first property, right, as a first-time home buyer. Employ some of the first-time home buyer programs like Golden State Financing Authority. It's a program that offers about a 4% down payment assistance in California specifically. There are other programs like that in many of the other states for people who are not in California. But it allows you to kind of get your foot in the door. And a lot of those programs, these down payment assistance programs, they do have income restrictions, but they're very aggressive. I'll give you an example. For instance, the California Housing Loan Insurance Fund, that's another down payment assistance program offered through the state of California. If you want to use the program for down payment assistance, you need to make no more than $230,000. That was last year. I haven't looked at 2021, but for 2020, if you were buying in Alameda, Contra Costa, San Francisco counties, you could make up to $230,000 a year and still qualify for this down payment assistance. And so there's many programs like that this individual could employ to buy their first property, you know, and get in there. And similar to the young lady who I mentioned earlier, who bought in March of last year, and now her house is worth $70,000 more, you could take that property, sell it, get your money out of it, and buy something, or you can pull the cash out. It just depends on how much it's appreciated.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Olive has a nice compliment. She writes, beautiful, smart young lady. Thank you, Dr. Webb, for having another power woman on your show to help the community. This is great information that people need to know. Thank you, Olive.
Thank you, Olive. That's sweet.
Next question, Jet. What is the quickest way to building wealth through real estate acquisition? So is there a so-called quick way?
Nothing good happens fast. So listen, Elnora, you told us at the top of the discussion that you need to make a decision, right? Plan accordingly. There's no quick way. This is not the lottery, even though some people view California real estate as the lottery. There's not really a quick way, but you know, a year will come fast. Again, not to keep harping on this young lady who purchased in March of last year, who now has $70,000 in equity in less than a year. I think that's pretty quick. It's not a guarantee, right? It just depends on what the market is doing. And actually, in speaking of the market, there's some speculation that 2021 is going to be as robust a housing market as 2020 was. And in spite of COVID-19, 2020 was a remarkable market. It was unbelievable. And there was a little bit of a delay, if you will, from March until like April, May, because we were all trying to figure out how to make this thing work. But literally last year was better than 2019 in terms of, you know, the housing market. And there's some speculation that 2021 is going to be, you know, on par.
Interesting. Thank you. So no quick route to real estate investment activity leading to actual wealth. There's the thoughtful, very mindful investment of knowledge, of skills, of resources, and just systematically building up. The only thing that may be quick is the market may shift in a way that we can't anticipate. And so there's more windfall, as that example demonstrates brilliantly. And yet, when you make a decision, when each one of us makes a decision, we really benefit from being committed, having faith, focusing, being emotionally committed, being active in taking particular steps towards the realization of that worthy ideal that we've created to begin with, and then being responsible for the results because we've done our due diligence that Lynell has emphasized more than once. Next question. Are there risks when trying to build wealth through real estate?
Absolutely.
Yes.
No question. There's
Yeah.
risk. There's risk in anything that you do that involves building wealth because it's all subject to market conditions. But, one of the beautiful things about real estate is that it really is one of those long-term investment opportunities. As I mentioned, like I said, my grandmother, when she bought a house in the 50s and held on to it for more than 30 years, and all you have to do is look at Bay Area real estate and the real estate in other states. People who buy homes for $20,000 in the 50s, and now those homes are worth 700, $1 million. I started my career in East Palo Alto in the 80s, and at that time, the market was these little 2 and 3 bedroom homes that are like 1,200 square feet were selling between $250,000 and $350,000, and the $350,000 were usually 2-story homes, all tricked out with landscape and all that kind of stuff. But the average home was selling at $250,000, $275,000. East Palo Alto right now, it's $1 million.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and those houses are, quite frankly, pretty much still the same. Some of them have had additions and so forth, but for the most part, the homes are pretty much what they were back in the 80s. And so that's an example of how, vital a real estate market is to, your portfolio in terms of building wealth. And then, again, it's just one vehicle. You don't have to use that one. It's a really good long-term strategy.
And I want to point out some of the things that are embedded, and you've already articulated some of these things in terms of risk. Negative cash flow, possible. So you have to anticipate and plan accordingly, as Lynell has indicated. High vacancy. So you may typically have tenants who are in place and something happens in that particular area or in the market overall. And so one or more of your rentals have vacancies. Maybe there's a history of management issues that you didn't pay attention to. So that's a possibility. Lack of liquidity. Being, again, in terms of negative cash flow, just anticipating, and structuring everything accordingly. And then hidden structural problems to the building itself that, a great assessor could not determine in advance of the purchase. So you've got to anticipate that as well. And then the unpredictable nature of the real estate market that Lynell has already indicated, in addition to natural disasters. And that's why you have insurance. And you can't get insurance on a property that suggests something. You've got to pay attention to that.
It should. And I just wanted to add this point, Elnora, that, when you think about the pandemic, it certainly has interrupted some rental income for investors, right? Because you've had a number of people who've been laid off. And so your point is well taken in that you have to plan for that. But there are certain things that I'm sure for some, this was something they couldn't plan for. Yeah. And so what do you do? And what a lot of investors have done is, they have reached out to their lenders and, began conversations regarding forbearance opportunities. So much like, those of you who may have student loans and how you have the opportunity to defer a loan or ask for a forbearance because of financial circumstances. That is also an opportunity with a mortgage, even if it's for an investment property. And with respect to the pandemic, a lot of lenders are very open to that. because it's not the investor's fault. I mean, they have tenants who are unable to pay because they are unemployed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Powerful. Are there any other questions? I have a home and would like to leverage it to buy more. Is this possible? Well, clearly. Good
Well,
news. You
it's
started
not.
off with a great example.
Yeah, it's not an absolute. You
Yeah.
have to have equity in the home to do that. But yeah, the way that it's possible to do is that you would pull cash out of the property, and most loans allow you to pull 80% of the value of your home out for cash out purposes. And so if we're talking about a $500,000 home, 80% of that is 400,000. If you owe, let's say you owe 250, there's $150,000 available for you to pull out to utilize for investment purposes, but you have to have the equity to do so.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Mhm.
Well, I think that was the last question in advance, right, Jet? Yes. Uh, I want to have a take this conversation in a slightly different direction. And you tell me how far you want to go, Lynell.
Okay.
I'm thinking about our the United States of America.
Mhm.
It's not the world. It's a key piece of the world, and yet we influence the world as the rest of the world influences us, and hopefully we do it moving forward in a much more healthier and respectful way. But there are some traumatic things that have happened over the years, and we're still in the midst of a pandemic
Yeah.
where we don't know if things are going to get qualitatively better. We're hopeful because of the vaccine, but quite frankly, with this new strand of COVID-19 that's supposedly much more devastating to the physical state of human beings, I'm concerned, and the potential for even more strains.
Yeah.
So how do we stay focused? Because a great deal of our success is based upon our mindset. What
Mhm.
we put into our system affects our emotional state, affects our behavior, and then affects our results. So, how do we stay focused, have the right kind of mindset that allows us to lead our lives in a way that gets the results that we really want? We may have all of our needs met, we may have shelter. Independent of the nature of the shelter, we may have shelter. We may have sufficient clothes, even if it's just 3 or 4 wardrobes. We
Mhm.
may have whatever it is, but how do we stay focused so that we don't get into a space where some of folks I know, too few, um, uh, are finding their way out of this? But among the few folks I know who are stuck emotionally because of
Mhm.
fear that is so well populated through the media, whether
Yeah.
it's social or television or other means, and they're stuck. Even though we have a new president and a new vice president, there's a sense of hope among these same people that they're still fearful.
Sure.
There's going to be another hammer that drops. There's going to be how to get people to turn down the noise and turn up their priorities, their perspective, their vision for themselves, and continue to move forward.
Yeah.
Your
I mean, that's a big question, Elnora. It's a big
yeah.
question. And sometimes I find in my role as a mortgage consultant, sometimes I find myself um, in a counseling role, if you will, right? Because buying real estate, whatever the case you're doing with real estate, it's a big deal, and it gives some people a lot of anxiety. And because this is what I've been doing forever, I don't necessarily have the anxiety about it, because I just talk about it from the perspective of this is what I do, and that kind of a thing. But I think that fear can
Mm,
certainly cripple an individual. And,
mhm,
I always remind people that, fear is false evidence appearing real. It's not real.
mm,
It's just not. And if you think about where we were in 2008 with respect to the mortgage meltdown crisis, which was a very devastating
mm,
time,
mm,
not just for people who were homeowners, but those of us who were in the business as
mhm,
mortgage professionals and real estate agents. And, was it difficult? Yes, I'm still here. I did have like a pause, if you will, but I came back because real estate is always going to be a great opportunity. And if you let your anxiety, control you, then what do you have? And so, I just think that we have to remind each other that it's okay to have some fear, but don't live by that. Don't allow it to control you, because tomorrow is another day, and providing God willing, you're here. You have another opportunity to make another decision to do something that's going to benefit your situation, whatever that might be. And I want to add this, Elnora, because I know that the pandemic has certainly created a whole another level of anxiety for people, whether you own a home or not. If you own a piece of real estate and you find yourself behind, and you're not opening your mail, you're not answering the phone because creditors are calling you and you don't know what to tell them, pick up the phone, open the mail, invite that conversation in, because it's actually not as bad as you think. At the end of the day, a lot of the regulators of kind of what is going on, the Federal Housing Financing Authority, the Fannie Mae, the Freddie Mac, the investors, the largest investors in our business, they have made some accommodations for homeowners, for renters, for small businesses, so that they may have some help along the way. But if you don't ask, you don't get. And so I think that a lot of times what happens is people bury their head in the sand. And then, 2 years later, they look up and say, oh, well, what happened? No one helped me. But we don't know you need help unless you ask the question.
That is so powerful. And I don't care how so-called well-educated one is, how learned, how street smart, how gifted, how, or even the roles that we hold, and the people we influence, all of us get stuck.
Yeah.
I can, as you were talking, Lynell, oh my goodness, that resonated with me. So I was going back to times where I didn't pick up the phone.
Yeah.
And it was during a series of one after the other death. And it was during a series of one after the other demands. And it was just like, and I allowed for that segment in time, I allowed for the fear to get me stuck. And that's normal.
Yeah.
When we are experiencing great distress, that's normal. You're not unusual. We're all the same. We're human. The power, though, is to press through that.
That's right.
What I call terror barrier, as someone else more informed described. And you press through that with knowledge. You press through that with the right connections, as Lynell just indicated. You move beyond it, even with fear, to get to the other side. And you're on the other side. It's like, what was the big deal?
Right. It's the fear of the unknown. Once you uncover it, you're like, oh, that's all. I mean, because I've talked to a number of people who've been in default and foreclosure, and it's like, it happens. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. Let's figure out how to fix it. Like people who may have credit problems, it's not the end of the world. We can help you fix it. It's okay.
And here's something else that I have found. I believed when I was young. I don't know why. I didn't read it somewhere. No one told me. I just understood it. And I think at the level, when we're quiet and silent, we find understanding, because the understanding usually is within. Yes, we get validated through books, through other people with expertise, et cetera, through scientific research, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of the truth that is evident, that's real, it's embedded in our DNA. And one of the things that I always thought was true was what I believed is what I would experience.
That's right.
And guess what? Much of what I've experienced is consistent with what I believed.
Yeah.
Not surprising. So if I believe I'm going to be successful, I'm already 99% there.
Right.
If I believe I'm not going to be successful, likewise, I'm 99% there. I'm right. It doesn't really matter what I believe. I'm right. Because I am going to behave in a way that is consistent with that belief. I'm going to welcome resources or negate resources that come my way consistent with that belief. Yeah. So I think that's part of the power of you, Lynell, moving through that time that was so painful during 2008, before and even afterwards,
Sure.
where you stayed in this role, in your sweet spot,
Sure.
as you've characterized,
Mhm.
because while you've experienced fear like a lot of folks, a lot of us,
Sure.
you allowed yourself to get unstuck and just continue to move. And
Right.
voila, we
Right.
still have you as an asset.
Yeah. I'm very grateful that I was able to make a comeback. Because some people didn't because they chose. You know what I mean? So, but yeah.
Yeah, and this is not to negate people by saying that if they just focused, if they just stayed, they would have been successful. We don't
No.
know. But
Yeah, we don't know
and that's
that.
why I didn't say 100%.
Yeah.
What I know is that the majority of the reasons why I experience X, Y, and Z is because of my leadership mindset. That's
Mhm.
the real story here, folks.
Right.
We experience wealth when we decide that's who we are and that's what we want to experience. And if it's something that is so foreign because we have taken on the badge of being Poe, then guess what? We will always be Poe. But just because other people may think you Poe doesn't mean you're going to be or you are Poe. Think
Mhm.
about that example I provided earlier that both Lynell and I know about. This brilliant, beautiful asset who served people, amassed wealth. And most folks thought she was Poe because she was in a so-called shotgun home where you shoot the gun at the front door, it goes right out the back door because it's so small.
That's right.
Okay. And yet she was wealthy financially beyond any person's perspective. But she was also wealthy, obviously, in terms of her mindset
Right.
and her own spiritual development, where she could give. She could have just used those assets and used them all kinds of ways while she was here. She was not focused on the external environment. She was focused on her own internal commitment.
That's right.
And that's the genius here about getting from where one is to building and sustaining wealth. Right, Linnell?
That's right. That's right. I don't know that I could add anything to that because yeah, you said it. You said it
Well,
all.
let me tell you, it's an honor knowing you, knowing about your legacy, which we could spend a whole day just talking about. And more importantly, knowing that you are here to always help make a difference and facilitate the financial success of individuals. So thank you for your commitment and
Thank
living in your sweet spot.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I thank you again for the invitation. This has been great, thought-provoking conversation. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Anila. I'm looking
My honor. Thank you so much. And so, as Lynell goes to the back of the studio, and Lynell, it's been an absolute pleasure. And hopefully, I want to say to you who are viewing now and in the future, leverage these wonderful nuggets, these gems. We always want to inspire you, yet, even more profound, we want you to walk away with a deeper understanding, more nuggets, tools that you can use to move towards that realization of your worthy ideal, an ideal that's worthy of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Jet, we have a guest for next week, and I'd like to bring that up. And so, the power of diverse leadership, an introduction to philanthropy and personal impact. Andrew, or as loved ones and friends call him, Andy or Drew, he would blush if he heard that. He's going to be on with us and talking about this important topic, having a rich discussion. So please join us next week, Wednesday, noon, uh, Pacific Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you'll figure out the time wherever you're at on the planet. We appreciate you being present and making a difference not only in the lives of hopefully your loved ones, in your own life, in the lives of those within the community, because you are making a difference for all of us, wherever you're at on the planet. So my distinct honor being here and being in community with you. Wado.